In the small town of Maplewood, the air was crisp and fresh. The trees were covered in beautiful colors, gold, red, and orange. It was autumn, the season when the leaves changed and the whole town seemed to slow down and enjoy the beauty around them. It was also the time for the annual Autumn Fest, a special tradition that everyone in Maplewood looked forward to every year. Amelia, a lively girl with curly red hair, was excited. She loved Autumn Fest more than anything. Her friends, Ethan, Mia, and Lucas, were just as excited. They had been looking forward to this day for months. Every year, they gathered in the community garden to celebrate the season with games, food, and fun activities. The community garden was the heart of the town, and during autumn, it looked like something out of a storybook. The ground was covered in colorful leaves, and squirrels ran around, gathering acorns to prepare for winter. There was so much to see and do. The garden was full of life, and the children couldn't wait to join in. "Wait for me," called Lucas, who was in a wheelchair. He moved easily through the garden, smiling as he caught up with his friends. Amelia waved and called out, "Come on, Lucas, we don't want to miss the opening ceremony." The garden was buzzing with activity. Stalls were set up with delicious homemade jams, cookies, and hand-knitted scarves. The air was filled with the sound of music from a local folk band. Everyone was chatting and laughing, and the smell of warm food and cider filled the air. In the middle of the garden stood an old oak tree, its branches reaching out as if it was embracing the whole town. Ethan, always curious, noticed a group of older people gathered around a small stage. "Looks like they're starting the storytelling," he said, pointing. The children walked over to join them. An elderly woman named Mrs. Whitaker stood on the stage. Her voice was soft, like a warm breeze, as she welcomed everyone. "Hello, dear children," she said with a smile. "Today we celebrate not only the season, but the stories and traditions that make Maplewood special." Mrs. Whitaker began to tell stories about autumn, stories of harvest moons, planting trees, and the old traditions that people had followed for many years. She told the children how autumn was once a time for families to give thanks for the harvest and prepare for the winter ahead. Amelia listened carefully, her eyes wide with interest. "Does everyone celebrate autumn in the same way?" she asked. Mrs. Whitaker nodded. "No, Amelia. Every culture has its own way of celebrating autumn, but all of them share the same ideas: thankfulness and hope for the future." The children thought about this. For Ethan, autumn meant the taste of freshly picked apples. For Mia, it was the feeling of a soft, cozy sweater. For Lucas, it was the bright colors of the leaves, which always made the world feel fresh and new. Amelia had an idea. "Why don't we create our own tradition?" she suggested. "Something that we can do every year and remember forever." Her friends loved the idea. They started to think about what kind of tradition they could start in their town. As the storytelling ended, the children walked around the garden, talking about their idea. They passed by some volunteers planting young trees. The volunteers were working hard, planting trees to help the garden grow. "Why don't we plant trees every year?" Mia said suddenly. "It's a way of giving back to nature." Lucas smiled. "Yes, and when we come back every year, we'll see how much the trees have grown. It will remind us of our time together." Ethan nodded. "It's something we can do every year. When we're older, we can come back and see the trees and think about the fun we had." The children went over to Mr. Barnes, one of the volunteers, and asked if they could plant some trees. Mr. Barnes was happy to help. "What a wonderful idea," he said, handing them small trees and shovels. "Planting trees is one of the best things you can do for the earth." The children found a quiet spot in the garden where sunlight filtered through the branches of the trees. They began digging holes and carefully planting the small trees. Each one was a promise to care for nature and for their friendship. "This tree is for the stories we heard today," Amelia said as she patted the soil around a young maple tree. "And this one is for all the adventures we will have together," Ethan added, planting another tree. They worked together, laughing and sharing their dreams for the future. The garden felt more special with each tree they planted. As the day turned into evening, the children gathered around a big bonfire. The air was filled with the smell of burning wood and the sweet scent of marshmallows roasting over the flames. Lucas held up his marshmallow stick. "Let's make a promise," he said. Every year, we'll come back, plant more trees, and celebrate autumn together. Deal, the others agreed, laughing and shaking hands with sticky marshmallow fingers. The night grew colder, but the warmth of the fire and the happiness of the evening made the children feel cozy. They joined in the dance, and the music played louder as the people of Maplewood sang and danced around the fire. Amelia looked at her friends and smiled. Autumn really is the best time of year, she said. The world seemed full of color and new possibilities. Mia, wrapped in a warm scarf, agreed. It's like everything is changing, but it's beautiful. Ethan looked up at the stars in the night sky, and it reminds us that change can be beautiful, he said softly. As the festival came to an end, the children stood by the trees they had planted. They looked at how small the trees were, but they knew that one day those trees would grow tall. The children promised to return every year to see how the trees had changed. Our trees are small now, Amelia said, but one day they'll be as tall as that big old oak tree. And we'll be here to see it, Lucas said confidently. The children held hands, making a silent vow to return each year, to care for the trees and to celebrate the magic of autumn. They knew that their new tradition would grow with them, just like the trees. As they walked home under the stars, the children felt happy. They knew that, like the seasons, they would grow and change, but their friendship and their new tradition would stay the same. In Maplewood, autumn wasn't just a season. It was a time to celebrate life, friendship, and the beauty of the world around them. And every year, when the leaves began to fall, the children would return to the garden, ready to plant more trees and celebrate the wonders of autumn together.